there was the story that many of you heard about, a young fellow who had been battling with Home Affairs for 5 years without an ID. And the young fellow came to the office, and the matter was dealt with, and today he has an ID. But I must say that that story has not ended very well, because 2 years down the line we're still trying to get the Department of Education to give him his matric results, and nobody seems to know what they did with them, which means 7 years down the line he still is not able to go to university, find a job, or do anything meaningful with his life. But again, the Father Christmas part of it was making sure that he did get his ID, and we do hope that he will get some kind of dispensation that will compensate for the 7 years he has lost of his life. Then there was a case of the SASSA lady who applied for a grant for one child, a child grant, and SASSA told her that you can't get a grant because according to us, the system says you already are getting a grant for 2 children. The lady said, no, I don't have any 2 children, I only have 1. If there are 2, delete them and replace them with 1. SASSA wouldn't have anything of it. She came to our office, we dealt with the matter, and we found that indeed there was someone else who had stolen her identity and who had 2 fictitious children. But it wasn't our complainant's fault. There was corruption in the system. There was a syndicator that was operating. People were buying cards to get fictitious children, and from Home Affairs they would get fictitious birth certificates, fictitious cards at the hospital. So the syndicate cut across 4 entities. It was Home Affairs, it was Department of Health, it was SASSA, then a supermarket that was conducting the payments. And to her, again, we Father Christmas, when the day her life was restored and her child was placed on the system, and she got paid back all of the money that was received. And I could talk endlessly about some of the cases that we've dealt with where people's lives and dignity have been restored. But I must also now talk about those that are accused. It is often said that people approach us to settle political scores or personal scores. That is true of any system. It can be potentially abused. The internal disciplinary processes of our own organizations can be abused with people accusing others falsely. People could accuse people falsely in the court system. But our job is to make sure that we get to the bottom of it. We find the truth, what really happened, what should have happened, and does it constitute maladministration? And in many instances, we come back and we say there was no violation of integrity, there was no wrongdoing, and we've done so with certain ministers, with certain public servants, etc. Now, do we bear bad news for some people? Certainly we often do that. But we do that again in the spirit of ensuring that Gogo Dlamini doesn't wait for her RDP house for 16 to 18 years, as it happens now, because somebody jumped the queue, because houses that were built had to be rebuilt and the money therefore went elsewhere, or because companies that shouldn't have gotten tenders got those tenders. And again, I'm going to give you an example of yet another example of a Gogo Dlamini. When we were in Free State in Nala recently, we met an old lady there who said that for years she's been just waiting for a home with a toilet. Indeed, a toilet was built, but the piping is not there, and somebody had been paid for building the waterborne sewage system when there was no piping. So for us, when we deal with those things, it's still to make sure that the vision that underpins our Constitution, which is about a state that delivers a better life for all, a state that restores human dignity, a state that promotes equality and ensures that the potential of every human being is freed, is the kind of state that we establish in our country. And we can't do so when there's maladministration, when there is corruption, and all sorts of forms of conduct that undermine good governance. I must indicate, though, that we also bear good news to government departments that are working hard and public officials that are working hard to make sure that their institutions are running smoothly, to make sure that their institutions deliver again on the constitutional promise. Some of you noticed recently with the results of the World Bank, where it was said that we're continuously becoming an unequal society. And they mentioned some of the factors that actually undermine people's ability to rise in the socio-economic spectrum of our society. They mentioned things like education, access to infrastructure, access to health, access to welfare. And the role of our office is really to work with the state, civil society, and everyone to ensure that we identify and remove factors within the state that undermine effective service delivery. We deal with the system as a whole whenever we have an opportunity, but more importantly, we deal with each and every complainant to ensure that we place you as closest as possible to where you would have been if the state had treated you right. We would just want to end with one particular case that where we tried to place a person as close as possible to where they would have been if the state had treated them right. This is the state where somebody went through the justice system and her case was postponed 48 times. She was a minor at the time and was a victim of gang rape. By the time the matter went to court, she was a grown-up, or she was over 18 and over 21. But what happened was that her life was totally devastated. She had not had any access to any rehabilitative program. She had not really been able to establish closure. And as we speak, she's uneducated, doesn't have a job, and that's what happened to her life. When we dealt with that case, we said the state indeed had wronged her, and we said the remedy for her was to make sure that there was some kind of general damages that make sure that she doesn't get to where she would have been, but she gets something to restore her dignity, but also to rebuild her life. We don't think when we do that that is outside the vision that underpins Section 182 of the Constitution, which is investigate, report, and take appropriate remedial action. And that's why we say to those in the state that says, you're not a court of law, therefore we shouldn't implement, we say you are unconstitutional, because then you are suggesting to Gogo Dlamini, who can't go to court, chooses to use this office, then she's coming to a gate to nowhere. That can't have been the intention of the drafters of our Constitution, and it certainly was not the intention of the King of Sweden when he introduced this institution in Sweden. I would be interested in hearing your views on whether we're right when we're saying, yes, we are an informal institution, yes, we are not a court, but our job nonetheless is to ensure justice, is to ensure public accountability, and is to ensure that an ordinary person is able to exact accountability from every level of public office. And that cannot happen if, when people speak through this office, people have a choice whether to listen or not to listen. We believe that there is no choice. People have to listen, and generally the courts agree with us. In other countries, these matters have been taken to court, and it's been the understanding that, yes, the public protector is not a court, but it's an informal, non-political, and non-judicial office that must be used to exact accountability. The enforcement is not like a court of law. The enforcement is through what we call moral suasion. We get people talking, we get people losing face, we get people being talked into doing the right thing. Thank you.